Daily Tech News Show is made possible by you listening right now. Thank you, Mike Cortez, Erwin Stour, Ken Hayes, and everybody. Welcome our brand new patron, Josh. Welcome, Josh. On this episode of DTNS, Google will not get rid of third-party trackers, but you still can. Why Amazon is losing money on your Echo. And Cate Lawrence joins us to talk about tech startups trying to keep your pets healthier. This is the Daily Tech News for Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024 in Los Angeles. I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Animal House, I'm Sarah Lane.
And I'm the show's producer, Roger Chang.
Joining us, Berlin-based journalist focusing on emerging and deep tech, and today on pet tech, Cate Lawrence. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Happy. Good to have you.
I was going to say Tuesday. No, it's Tuesday.
It is
Yeah,
Tuesday. It is. I had to look too. It's one of those kinds of weeks, especially with the CrowdStrike bug causing havoc everywhere. Where there's more speculation about what caused it. We haven't heard anything substantial from CrowdStrike. I do cover some of the speculation in my Substack newsletter. You can get that at freetechnewsletter.com. When there's more solid info, we'll have it right here on Daily Tech News Show. So let's start with the rest of the quick hits.
Google will not acquire security company Wiz after all. Sources told CNBC that the company was concerned about antitrust investigations and other investment issues. Wiz co-founder Asaf Rappaport wrote in a memo to employees that the company will instead focus on an IPO and reaching $1 billion in annual recurring revenue. The company made $350 million last year, so there's room to grow. Wiz's products can flag security issues for applications and data and cloud services like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Oracle, and Google. It's not in competition with CrowdStrike, in case you were wondering.
That definitely went through my head first of like, oh, are they backing off because they see an opportunity? But apparently not. Meta released Llama 3.1, its newest and most capable model that is open for anyone to use unless you're a company with hundreds of millions of users, in which case you have to license it. Llama 3.1 has 405 billion parameters, and Meta says that it can outperform OpenAI's GPT-4o and Anthropic Claude 3.5 Sonnet. It will start powering Meta's chatbots starting in WhatsApp this week and then later in Instagram and Facebook, though you will have to select it manually. It won't be the default option, and you have a limited number of queries you can use it for per week. There's also a new feature called Imagine Me that lets you scan your own photo and place yourself in a generated image.
Adobe rolled out some new generative features for Illustrator and Photoshop. In Illustrator, generative shape fill lets you describe in text how to add detailed vectors to shapes. It also improves text to pattern for making things like a wallpaper that's very specific behind a subject. Photoshop gets a generate image feature powered by Firefly Image 3, so you can create an image with text anywhere you want. Generative fill also gets greater sharpness and detail in the enhanced detail feature. And the selection brush tool is more generally available for separating objects from the canvas.
Scientists from Google, MIT, Harvard, and the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts published an article in the journal Nature Monday about a model called Neural GCM. This generative model is more accurate than models that are only based on machine learning. This combines a few different things, and it's better than machine learning-based models on 1 to 10-day forecasts specifically. It's also better on a few other things. It can combine machine learning with neural networks and is trained on past weather data. It incorporates physics equations that model global circulation and therefore can also project climate conditions across decades, so in the future. The model is open source and efficient. It can run on a laptop. So you don't need to have hours and hours of time on a supercomputer, and it will actually, according to them, outperform those models that need hours and hours on a supercomputer.
Spotify has picked up some steam, beating analyst estimates for its latest quarter, with revenue up 20%, cost down 16%, and subscribers up 14% on the year to 626 million monthly active users. 246 million of those are paid premium subscribers now and brought in 88% of its revenues. Spotify raised prices in June and brought down costs by reducing its marketing spend, and it also laid off around 1,800 workers at the end of last year, 2023.
All right, let's get to the biggest news of the day. Google will not, after all, deprecate third-party cookies in the Google Chrome browser the way Safari and Firefox have. If you don't know what a third-party cookie is or you're a little unclear on the concept, those are cookies set in your browser not by the site you're visiting. So if you're visiting facebook.com, maybe Google is setting a cookie. Probably unlikely, bad example, but you get the idea. The reason a third party would want to set cookies on sites that aren't its own is so they can collect information about you from multiple sites, gather some information and say, oh, Tom, you like dogs, we noticed. We can now target you with dog ads. Google was going to get rid of third-party cookies, just like Firefox and Safari, and instead use something called the Privacy Sandbox. This was supposed to replace third-party cookies so that you weren't directly tracked. It would keep information about your browsing habits anonymized in Chrome, and then Chrome would only communicate that data to say whether an ad should run or not, but it wouldn't share any of that data with the third parties. Now, there's a lot of good work done on whether they could actually start to learn something about you based on what ads are allowed to be served or not, but it wasn't as direct of a tracking as a third-party cookie, but it also wasn't as privacy protecting as Safari and Firefox, which just said, no, you can't track them at all. So Google is not going to get rid of third-party cookies after all, but it will introduce what it calls a new experience in Chrome. And we had to go to the UK Competition and Markets Authority to get a more detailed description. The CMA says it has been talking to Google and that Google will use a user choice prompt, which will allow users to choose whether to retain third-party cookies or not. It's actually similar to what Apple does. It'll pop up a thing saying, hey, these folks would like to share your data. You cool with that or not? Most people say no. So with Google, if you say no, they'll do the Privacy Sandbox. They are going to keep Privacy Sandbox around as an alternative. If you as a user say no, don't let them use third-party cookies, Chrome will block the third-party cookies and use Privacy Sandbox instead. Along with this announcement, Google released a lot of data trying to show how effective Privacy Sandbox is in tests, because really what they're trying to do is get advertisers to sign on to Privacy Sandbox, but advertisers aren't buying it. They think the third-party cookies are better. So this is a way to stop the advertisers from causing havoc with Google, especially because their main business is selling advertising, but maybe coaxing them into using the Privacy Sandbox instead, while also trying to mollify all the regulators around the world who don't want the Chrome browser to be sharing information with third parties. Cate, how excited are you that Google is doing this instead of just getting rid of third-party cookies?
It's an interesting move from Google, I think. And I'll be interested to see how it matches up to the privacy demands of something like GDPR.
Yeah, because there's also the requirement that you notify people for cookies from websites on top of that. And you have to have informed consent. So Google is having to do a lot of work with the EU and the UK CMA about that. Sarah, does this make much difference to your usage of Chrome?
Not really, especially because this has been going on for years, with Google saying, we're going to delay that whole third-party cookie thing going away just to make sure we get it totally right. We're going to do that again. We just want to make sure it's just perfect before we do something that other browsers already did a long time ago. Privacy Sandbox already existed. So the whole new experience in Chrome, I don't really understand. Google's like, okay, we're just going to use the Privacy Sandbox that either as a consumer, maybe it's fine with you as a consumer, but if it isn't, it's like, okay, well, it's not good enough because third-party cookies are sort of there still. And if you're an advertiser, you're like, oh, well, now I just have to use the Privacy Sandbox whether I want to or not, which, like you said, Tom, you can find out a fair amount of somebody, especially over time, by their habits, even if it's somewhat anonymized, but it's not what advertisers want. They want more specific data about, where I am and when I'm there and why. So I don't know. I could see a lot of consumers that aren't, as technically minded as all of our listeners are, just kind of being like, I see ads on the internet. What's the difference? Is it really going to change my experience? Probably not. Probably not that much. For those of you who say this is totally not good enough, and maybe Google just never meant do away with third-party cookies this entire time? I mean, I'm sure the company has thought of lots of different scenarios, and this was just the middle ground that made the most sense for the company because Google is a different company than Apple or Mozilla. Google wants to make money from ads. So I'm not surprised by this. I'm not particularly bent out of shape because I'm not surprised by it.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember is that Google has pressures to make money, which Firefox does too. Apple does too. They just decide to make their money in a different way. Google has the pressure of the advertisers who don't want them to get rid of third-party cookies in a much bigger way than Firefox and Apple does, right? It's a much bigger part of their business. But they also have the pressure of their audience. The audience wants privacy protections and is very loud and talking about it. So they're trying to satisfy both of those masters, right? By saying, all right, we'll do privacy sandbox, but we won't force the advertiser, but we are going to ask people, and most of them are going to say no. So you're going to want to move on a privacy sandbox anyway. And by the way, look at these numbers. It's 97% as effective as third-party trackers. It's just a decision by committee. I think what it's going to end up doing, I don't know, you two tell me what you think, but I think it's just going to annoy people because you're suddenly going to get a bunch of pop-ups asking you if you want to allow third-party trackers or not.
Yeah, unfortunately. And we already have those in Europe.
Yeah, right. We have those in California too. Yeah.
There's actually widgets now you can install plugins to stop them because they're constant every time you're researching.
Yeah, the Cookie-O-Matic is the one I use for
that's
the
what
extension.
I need that.
Changes your life.
I used to be very thoughtful, like, okay, which ones are okay? You know, the essentials, marketing, no. And now I'm just like, yes, I want to read the article.
Life's too short.
There you go.
Yeah. GPEG84 says, I try not to block ads because behind every ad is someone trying to earn a living through a company they're making the ad for. I think that's an admirable sentiment. I think it's probably a minority sentiment, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, since Amazon's Echo launched way back in 2014, been around 10 years, can you believe that? More than 500 million voice-enabled hardware devices have been sold, either from Amazon's own Echo line or a compatible one, like Sonos One speakers. I've got 2 of them at my house. So it might be a little confusing that the Wall Street Journal's sources say Amazon has lost tens of billions of dollars on its devices business, the entire devices business, between 2017 and 2021. So that's the data that we're looking at. Amazon is said to be launching a paid tier for its assistant. You know what her name is. Any day now, internally codenamed Banyan, and rumored to offer a smarter and more robust product called Remarkable. You know who her name is. We'll call her A, which may bring some revenue up. Certainly some people are going to buy it, but kind of a hard sell for people like me who don't buy Amazon products through my smart speakers that are Amazon Assistant enabled. The Wall Street Journal made a good analogy to Gillette razor blades. Basically, Gillette sells the blades below cost. It's a money loser. But then you rack up the bucks over time on refill blades, which, as everyone who buys refill blades know, are kind of expensive. And the problem with Echo, you might say, okay, so if Amazon's selling an Echo at or below cost, how do they make money otherwise? Well, what Amazon wanted in a perfect Amazon utopian world 10 years after the launch of this is, we're just buying stuff on Amazon through our speakers. And sometimes people do that, but more often than that, we're setting alarms, we're checking weather. Maybe you got your news briefings in the morning. I'm playing music. I already pay for Apple Music, so I'm not buying anything on Amazon for that. There's an occasional question, a trivia question, or you add something to your shopping list, and maybe that shopping list is not even something that you end up buying through Amazon. It doesn't create purchases. Cate, I was wondering if you've got an Echo device or anything similar and what you think about Amazon's conundrum.
Yeah, I do. I have an Amazon Echo myself. I mean, it's such a legacy product. Like you said, it's been, 10 years? And it was, when it came in, it was that era before a lot of the apps were around, where it was, it promised this kind of functionality of, being a way to consume products and to buy and to communicate, perhaps echo to echo, things like that. And I'd say all of it's been superseded by the phone, mobile phones. And my other thought is I would really question about who's the next generation of buyers. Are we talking about millennials? Are we talking about Gen Alpha? I can't see them buying it, frankly.
Yeah, I look at this and I think every time I ask it a question, I'm losing Amazon money. They sold these things to me below cost. I don't ever buy anything with it. I am annoyed by the fact that it's trying to continually upsell me on things, which I understand why, because they're trying to make money off of it. I'd almost rather pay a subscription fee if it was small and reasonable to make it work better so that it was smarter and could just, answer my questions better. Because how many times have I asked it something and we asked it, what's the weather in Inglewood, meaning Inglewood, California? It knows we're in California. And it said, here's the weather for Inglewood, New Jersey, the other day. I'm like, yeah, that's worth $1.99 a month to make it answer correctly, I think.
Yeah, the price will be important. I don't know. Like you said, this could be a wonderful product that's priced reasonably and, it's less than, what I pay for my Google Cloud storage every month type thing. I use Amazon's Assistant for all sorts of routines on a daily basis. I've got smart lights. I do, I've got, my morning routine where I say good morning, and then all this stuff happens, in succession. I get my news briefing. I get my weather. Yeah. I do have an Echo Show in the kitchen, and very occasionally something, because I've got sort of a slideshow going at all times, or it'll suggest something to me that it knows, a certain gummy vitamin that, it thinks maybe I'm out of. Occasionally that will spur a purchase from me, but not very often. Not very often. It's a device that is sort of a smart device in my home that does not compel me to buy anything. If I'm going to buy something, I reach for my laptop.
Yeah. Although I guess if it reminds you, and even if you reach for your laptop, that is a purchase you made because of the Echo.
That's true.
The problem is, how do you account for that? This Wall Street Journal article has a whole section on downstream accounting and how they weren't doing it right because one purchase on Amazon could be claimed by the Fire TV device that showed you an ad and the Echo and anything else from Amazon you had. And so sections of the company were all counting the same revenue multiple times, which meant they looked more profitable on paper than they were.
Well, and you compare it to something like a Kindle, right? So the
Kindle
hardware division, Kindle's in there. Kindles do well for Amazon because you buy a Kindle and then you buy ebooks. There's sort of no reason to have a Kindle otherwise, unless you're kind of doing some sort of, backdoor hacky stuff. So Amazon, that works. So the Kindle group and the services group both say, yay, let's split the cost. And we both look really good on paper.
Yeah, because when you have a Kindle, it makes sense to buy a book for the Kindle because you're going to read it on the Kindle.
Yeah.
When you have an Echo, it doesn't make sense to buy the razor blades from the Echo. You're not going to use the razor blades on the Echo. And you kind of want to make sure you're getting the right ones too. I think that's why I always end up going to the app or the laptop or something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly those kind of products where there's a visual element.
Yeah.
And I think most people want to see what they're buying, unless it's a repeat, shopping list.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, there are things that I still have to go to a Target or a Safeway or I just psychologically, I want to pick it up and take it home. I don't know. It's maybe just because I'm an old person. But there you go. Amazon, best of luck. If you're an Apple fan, you might be an Amazon fan as well. But Apple fans, we do see you, we hear you. And Eileen Rivera and I decided to make a podcast for you and all of us. Every week, we host Apple Vision Show. We talk about products, tips, all the news, and lots more. In fact, we just published our 25th episode talking about the Olympics, talking about what's going on, the rumors about the new iPhone 16, lots of good stuff. AppleVisionShow.com is where you can find out more, and we'd love it if you join us.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that every startup is about AI these days, especially because every startup tries to use the word AI when they make their pitch. But there's an entire segment of the tech community focus on pet health. Cate has been following this area. Tell us a little bit about some of the innovations these companies are bringing to pet health.
Yeah, I mean, couple of the biggest trends I'm seeing at the moment is diagnostics, because particularly for conditions that it's harder to detect. So we're able to do, for example, at-home diagnostics. There's some really interesting stuff happening with PCR parasite screening with the Vietnamese company. There's an American company doing oncology screenings, like cancer screenings. Probably the one I've really got my eye on is called Lampovet. It's an Italian company, and they're focused on gut biome in pets, where it integrates sort of at-home testing for microbiomes in the animals, and then the results are shared with a vet as a way to determine the ideal diet for a pet and whether there's any supplements needed. Probably the last one I'd mention in this area that's really, I think this is the start of something we're going to see a lot more of. It's a company called Sylvester AI, and they basically have an app where they're tracking pet health, or cat health rather. The way they're doing it, they're actually looking at the face of the animal. So they're looking at their facial expressions, because we know that cats notoriously are programmed to hide pain. So how do you tell when a cat's in pain if it's not, obviously limping? So they basically have a model looking at the expressions based on a pain scale from a veterinarian pain scale, and they say that's at an 85% precision. So that's pretty cool.
So it's like a computer vision thing where it's trained to check that out.
Yeah, and it's something that, this is a standalone company, but I know I'm already seeing companies here in Europe talking about integrating this into something like a smart cat litter or something like that. So an add-on to an additional product, maybe a subscription, some interesting stuff there. Probably one other one I'd mention in this area would be VetChip, which is actually an Australian company. And they're looking at a biosensor that you place under the skin, much like you would an ID chip for an animal. And that's where you get all those usual kind of Fitbit metrics that you would get with a wearable collar or what have you. Super interesting.
Yeah, a lot of these are at home for things that I would have to go to the vet for. Parasite analysis, at home cancer screening. The idea of not having to take the pet into the vet, I think, is incredibly appealing to most people, because pets never like it. But how complicated is that to do yourself? It seems messy.
This is a really good point. I mean, I think the tests are pretty easy to do. Most of them are kind of, pee on a stick type stuff.
Okay.
At that kind of level. However, the problem is integration. So, for example, you may be able to use the virtual pet center, for example, no problem. And you could do your blood test, but then you might need to get medication, for example. So therefore, how do you get the medication? If the company is, for example, in Europe, maybe they're on the other side of Europe. Therefore, I'm going to have to go to a vet to get that. And I'm going to have, I've got these tests online. Does this integrate with their ERP? Do they recognize the tests themselves? Because there's all this kind of proprietary stuff. And a lot of vet clinics are still that kind of old school, old school software. And so that'll be the biggest problem for a lot of this stuff. And vets are very, very cautious of supporting any tech in general because of the risks. They don't want to be seen as peddling any subscription products or, supplements or pet food, things like that. That's kind of your sticking point there.
Yeah, so there's always that. This is true of any startup area, right? Is getting the trust and the acceptance and the integration. What about support for the startups in general? How are they getting their funding?
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting programs that I recommend anyone to check out just for interest to see what's happening in the sector. Unleashed by Purina, which is obviously a pet food company. They have like an incubator or accelerator program for pet tech companies, and they correspond with lots of events, regional events where startups can go and do the program. They get a little bit of funding. They get to, work with a big company with the idea that could become a customer in the future. Similarly, Mars Pet Care, which is a subdivision of Mars, they have a VC investment ring now, which is really interesting. And they invest in startups. They do conferences around Europe, UK, I think US as well, of course. So a really good way to bring that support in, because they're basically looking for the next big products to acquire, I guess.
That's Mars, the candy maker Mars?
Totally.
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah. Don't give a Mars bar to your pet, though. That's probably...
Well, and M&M's, Snickers. I mean, Mars is... They got a lot of stuff.
It's a massive company. It's a behemoth.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So do you know, like, what are the conditions of this? Does Purina or Mars get a stake? Is that how this works? Are there partnerships, or is this just grant money?
Yeah, I mean, you can do the product, you can do the programs. There's no proof that they will become an investor in that real sense. Series, pre-seed, seed, Series A, what have you. But what it does is it introduces you to people in the industry, which is often the hardest thing. This is a very saturated industry for startups, particularly anyone doing your more kind of standard stuff like, say, pet food, and trying to crack those markets is really difficult.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a little more on Good Day Internet about some of the other things that you're finding, but let's finish here with, what do you see coming? What are some of the next pet tech innovations on the horizon?
Yeah, just probably 2 or 3 big things. First one is elder care. People are having pets longer, of course, as in part of their life, and the need for more research into quality of life for animals as they age, and their needs in gerontology, so forth. Not to be on a downer, but pet euthanasia, end-of-life care, including things like disposal, particularly if you live in an apartment, for example. You might be having this great virtual vet, but how do you get rid of your animal, right? If you that's a fact of the matter. Likewise, we're going to see things like funerals, that kind of care support side of things. I think that's probably a little bit underestimated, given that people are, choosing pets over children in some respects. The other one I would really push is personalized medicine. An example is a really interesting Helsinki company called Curify, and they're making 3D printed tools to enable compound pharmacy manufacturers to make tablets, for example, in different shapes, different colors and flavors.
That is a genius idea.
I mean, obviously it's not limited to pets, let's be clear.
Sure.
But I mean, it's, you could imagine, like, for example, if you have a cat that's allergic to chicken, you can take chicken out of it, or what have you. And you can put it in a different shape for a smaller animal.
Or you have a 13-year-old border collie that is too smart to take any pill that you give him. So you need to come up with different shapes and flavors and things like that.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Because we went through that with my border collie Sawyer, and we had to get compounded medicine, and we had to try to get special shapes, but there was a limit to what we could try, and this would make it almost limitless. That's amazing.
And it's not cheap, let's be honest.
Yeah, sure. No, it's definitely not. Well, thank you so much, Cate. I know we're going to plug this at the end, but you're following this space very, very closely. So where should people go to find more of what you're doing?
I mean, you can join us at TechEU. We do all kinds of news. We cover everything, it seems, these days, because the news is always moving. And there's so much happening. LinkedIn, obviously, Twitter.
Excellent.
Twitter X.
We're going to repeat that again just in a minute, but first let's check the mailbag.
So there was a discussion on the most recent twit, that's This Week in Tech, where Tom and I both used to work, that suggested the Southwest using Windows 3.1 story was a myth. This article supports that as well. This comes from Dawn, who sends us the article, which we will have in our show notes, with a quote from December 30th of 2022 saying, "Some systems even look historic, like they were designed on Windows 95.
Yeah, so he actually sent me a different link from a place I wasn't familiar with, but that linked to this Dallas Morning News story that Sarah mentioned. And the reason that I passed along the Southwest information earlier this week is that, in the limited time we have, I usually go for trusted sources. And Digiday and Forbes are both medium trustworthy. They do a good job. Nobody's perfect and such. But I was like, well, if Forbes and Digiday are both saying it, chances are they did their research. And unfortunately, I should have clicked one more time, because Digiday linked to this Dallas Morning News story where they didn't even mention Windows 3.1. They just said that the old stuff Southwest used looked like Windows 95. Now, I saw enough other people mentioning this, people who are knowledgeable mentioning this, that I still suspect there might be something to the story. So, if you work at Southwest Airlines and you can say yay or nay, I'll keep your identity secret, but feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com. Anyway, chances are that it might not be true at all. And what I said earlier this week still holds. If it were true, that means there are even more security vulnerabilities for Southwest Airlines running old operating systems like that. But hopefully it's not true. So there you go. And thank you, Don, for sending that along. Appreciate it.
Indeed. Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com is where to send those emails that are always helpful to us. Cate Lawrence, you've been very, very helpful to us. Talk about links in our show notes. We're going to have all sorts of links to cool companies. You mentioned tech.eu, where people can find you. You also mentioned X, but you didn't mention your handle. So where can people find you there?
Oh, at Cate_Lawrence would be it. Yep.
Cool. Cate
and
with
Cate
a C.
with a C.
Anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty easy to find.
Excellent.
Well, we're glad you found us.
You can find more of all three of us if you're a patron, because we have the extended show, Good Day Internet. We're going to talk more pet tech with Cate and probably a bunch of other things because it is Taco Tuesday. Stick around.
You can catch our show live Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern. That's 2000 UTC, and find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live. We're back tomorrow talking about Bethesda employees unionizing, with Scott Johnson joining us. Talk to you then.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.